Today I sat down with Ken Moser from Briercrest College in Saskatchewan, Canada. Hey, Ken's an American, but he grew up in Australia where he got his degrees, and now he's the assistant professor of youth ministry at Briercrest College. Many of us in youth ministry work to balance discipleship with evangelism. How is it that we can reach out and yet build disciples, and often do that with youth who are mildly interested at best? Ken's done a lot of study and work in developing a philosophy of ministry where you build disciples first and then you do outreach. And that's what he's going to talk to us today, where he's built this model called Flow, and I'm excited to have him at the Roundtable today. Hi, welcome to the YS Roundtable, brought to you by the Youth Specialties Academic Network. And we're here at the Remedy Live Studios. I'm your host, Terry Linhart. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for another episode. Each week we sit down with leading educators and researchers from around the world who are shaping youth ministry, and today we're joined by Ken Moser from Briercrest College in Saskatchewan, Canada. Ken, thanks for joining us here on the Roundtable.
Hey, my pleasure. Good to be here.
Yeah, so I know a little bit about you. You're a professor of youth ministry there. Tell us about your background. I know you've been in a variety of settings. How did you come to Briercrest, and what happened before then?
Well, here's 51 years in about 30 seconds. Born in Alaska, raised in Arizona, university in Southern California. Became a Christian when I was 20 at Robert Schuller's Crystal Cathedral in Fullerton. I then hopped on a sailboat and sailed for a year around the South Pacific. I ended up in Sydney, Australia, where I stayed. I went to seminary there. I did further study there. I ministered in Australia for 25 years in a whole bunch of different contexts, with mainly churches, but with teaching and consulting and training. God then took us to Vancouver, British Columbia, where we spent 5 years there working with a church and a denomination, setting up youth ministry stuff. And 2 years ago, I moved to sunny Saskatchewan, Caronport, Saskatchewan, where I teach youth ministry at Briercrest College and Seminary. And it's a beautiful day here in Saskatchewan.
So I'm glad we caught you on a beautiful day in Saskatchewan. And you are truly a multicultural guy there, traveling all over those places. So thanks for being.
Some would say mixed up.
Yeah, that's right. So I know you've done a lot of speaking at the various YS conferences in Canada and the US, and you've written quite a bit. And today we're going to be talking with Ken about just some of his concerns with the new paradigms of youth ministry, and looking at some of the models and reevaluating it for the future. So Ken, tell us a little bit about how this burden for effectiveness in youth ministry grew in your life.
Well, like most guys, I ran what's called the attractional model of youth ministry. I ran it for a couple of years, and I saw some success, certainly numerical success, but I didn't see a spiritual depth that I wanted. And to make a very long story short, I slowly began to unpack and think about what do we do and when do we do it? And I was committed to an evangelism first strategy, which is what most people are committed to. And through a long process of talking with people, of observing youth ministries, of trial and error, and of reading my Bible, I've come to the conclusion that evangelism, while it's super important, obviously, nobody's going to dispute that, evangelism has its setting secondary to discipleship. And so I want to focus on building strong disciples primarily, and building a strong discipleship community primarily, and then unleashing that, if you will, as an evangelistic program. Now that's going to have it's a fairly simple concept, but it's going to have a whole bunch of ramifications in what you do, when you do it, how you do it, who you do it with, all that, all those kind of things.
Yeah, so I think this is a fairly significant thing to talk through, because we've had other people come through the roundtable here and talk about a similar burden they have. Because I think if you threw most people out there, you would say do youth ministry, they would use the model of like win, build, send, or attract, build, send, and we try to get people to come in our doors. You've kind of through your own reading of Scripture and other ways kind of have developed a new paradigm model. I thought maybe you could share that with us.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've spoken, like a lot of youth ministry educators, I've spoken to a ton of youth leaders, and I've been in youth ministry for 30 years. And what I found in speaking literally to 1,000 or more youth leaders at least, is that we all share very similar problems. And it was uncanny the way these conversations tracked. And people seem to share the same experience. And now as I read a bunch of literature that's coming out from YS and other groups, people are saying very similar things. And what I want to do is I want to push a little bit. And I want to say, let's rethink winning people as number one priority. Because what that's going to do is that's going to cause us to shape a program, usually based around activities, entertainment, fun, games, that sort of thing. And I think that style of program has an inbuilt time bomb that explodes in our present falling away, dropout crisis. What you attract people with just seems to set them on a certain course, and then they tend to move on. And we all know the statistics of people who are falling away. So what I want to think through is let's spend time building people to be strong Christians first. So if a youth leader is involved in a church, they're there because there's probably youth there. So focus your time on that group of young people. Try to disciple them individually in small groups, and try to develop a community that self-disciples. Then let's use that to do evangelism. And let's do evangelism in a much more authentic way, where we ask people to join us for a whole number of reasons, to hear about Christ, to experience Christ, to have some questions answered, have some hurting needs hopefully met, and just to see and experience what an authentic, active Christian community looks like. Not a community geared toward attraction through trying to figure out some perceived or felt need from that particular crowd and then running that type of program.
Yeah, and I think some of where I've seen the changes happening is that it's harder to really attract kids through entertainment events as well. Let's talk about this community a little bit, because for me, this sounds like the key ingredient to what's going to, if I can use a better term, to work in this. With the people that you've seen working and developing this model, how have they gone about creating that authentic Christian community with teenagers?
Well, the good news is that you can do it, and it's very effective. The bad news is it's actually quite difficult. It's difficult in any culture, but especially in this time-poor, entertainment-rich, hyperactive, busy culture, it's difficult. And so there's two key areas that we need to focus on in the brief time that we have. You need to develop a buy-in from the young people and a degree of commitment. So there's a sense in which a Christian community becomes a little bit like a hockey team or a musical group. You don't come and go, and you don't participate when your schedule allows it. You need young people to say, I'm actually going to place high priority on this and give it buy-in. Now that's a hard thing to do, but I think there are some ways that you can facilitate that. Secondly, and this will help to facilitate that first one, is you need a good relational structure. And we all know that relationships are key to everything Christian. And they're super important in a discipleship and a building model. So we need a good relationship between key leader and youth, a good relationship between key leader and leaders, a good relationship structure between leaders amongst themselves, a good structure of youth amongst themselves, and a good relational structure between the youth group and the church. And so I'm going to come in, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to form a leadership team that understands it, and that is as committed as the youth are. Then I'm going to work good point. Yeah, leadership team of young adults, basically depending on your situation, it's going to vary. Then those group of leaders are going to form numbers willing, small groups of committed youth who are going to who are going to either buy in or give it a shot for 4 to 6 weeks. Then we're going to structure a meeting that's going to try to derive its enjoyment through doing Christian things and doing them together. Now, again, we could talk for hours on that, but that's the concept in brief.
Sure. And when you say doing Christian things, what are some of those activities that you would do?
Yeah, the pursuit of Christian disciplines. So, there's obviously the key ones, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones that there's going to be prayer, there's going to be Bible study, there's going to be worship, there's going to be encouraging each other, there's probably going to be a meal involved, there's going to be a time of sharing the good things that we've discovered about God or what God has done in our life, and learning the Bible in creative and active ways. And the goal there is to not have a dichotomy between fun and serious. And that's what I'm still seeing in youth groups today. Even youth groups that are wrestling with the old attractional model and trying to move away from it, they still have that split program of let's do the fun stuff. Now let's move on to the serious stuff. And I think that's a very, very unhelpful paradigm. And I want to say let's derive enjoyment from doing the serious stuff. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Ken, that's great material. And I this model of build, reach, and flow, I think has a lot of Acts 2 in there. There's a lot of interdependent community that I hear you talking about. But the word flow, I think, is the one that interests me the most. I wonder if you could explain what that means.
Yeah, I think we've grown up with a faulty understanding in some of our aspects of youth ministry. We've built a model where we have a whole bunch of kids join us and a number of kids leave us. And I think that's unhelpful. And so flow is simply this. The best way to grow is to keep what you've got. And so I want to work through having multiple youth groups. And there's nothing new here, a junior high, a senior high, a college and career group. But then I want to think very strategically about how I move them up from one group to the next, how I do it, when do I do it, what is the best program that I could put into place. So an obvious example is Sunday school, children's work, into a junior high ministry or your youth ministry. We need to think very carefully about how we move those children into a youth ministry. And quite often they've come from a kind of a safe, warm children's program into a little bit more of a, if I can use some strong language, hostile, violent youth program where we're hitting each other with objects, we're slamming into each other, we're running around. And that's kind of an unhelpful movement. So I want to think through, how do I flow children into youth? And how do I connect youth to young adults? And in my experience, we've actually done fairly poorly in this department.
Ken, that's great. And I think this idea of flowing, keeping what you have is really significant, and building first before reaching out. I appreciate your time and challenging us today on the YS Roundtable. For more information about what Ken's talked about, feel free to check out the URL on the screen, and we'll see you next time on the YS Roundtable. As Ken talked today, did you find yourself resonating with what he was saying about building strong Christians first and then doing outreach? That's kind of a flip for some people who want to do outreach first and then build their youth group. Whichever way you envision your youth ministry, it's important for each of us to have our balance between discipleship and evangelism, to understand how we're going to reach out and how that fits with building strong Christians within our program. Thanks, Ken, for joining us here at the Roundtable. And if you want to email the show, you can do so at roundtable@youthspecialties.com. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Roundtable, and we'll see you next time.